Hello and welcome to Roger's Readings, a recorded Roger's Readings, because I'm not here. Well, I am here at the moment, obviously. God, that would just be silly, wouldn't it? No, I'm away at the moment. Helen and I are away doing a trade fair, a bee trade fair at the moment. In fact, we're probably in the thick of things as we speak. But we will be back tomorrow, all things going well. And so I will be live tomorrow for Star Wars Day. So don't worry. Unfortunately, Doctor Who fans, I'm really sorry you've had to give up a Doctor Who Day. I might try and get one in next week, just to make up for it. Okay. So my apologies to anybody expecting a Doctor Who Day today. But we have the fourth part of Beast Quest, Spiros, the Ghost Phoenix. Now, if you haven't already seen parts 1, 2 and 3, may I suggest you go up there and click on the magnifying glass and type in Spiros, Spiros, and watch chapters 1, 2 and 3. Or just go to YouTube, which you're probably on at the moment anyway. Yes, you are on YouTube at the moment. They're up there. They're up there. Chapters 1, 2, and 3. May I suggest you watch them before you watch this? Yeah, that would probably be better actually. It's a very exciting story. So yeah, I would suggest doing that if you are up to date with what's going on. Welcome to the final part. It all gets very, very exciting. So, without further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I'm going to have a quick slurp of coffee. Star Wars mug for tomorrow. Then I shall begin. Chapter 5, The Final Fight. Sethrina lowered her weapon and arched one eyebrow. "Don't you dare to fight me?" asked Tom. Sethrina smiled and sheathed her sword. "Why should I deal with you?" she said. "I have a beast for that." "Nordren!" At her command, the Black Phoenix stepped forward. Spiros, who had been resting near the door of the cavern, let out a cry of despair. "Ah!" Epos screeched, "Ah!" and moved towards Tom. He held up his hand to tell the flame bird to stop, then raised his sword. This was his battle. Nordren spread her wings, which spanned half the cavern, and leapt into the air, her talons outstretched. Tom pushed his aunt and uncle aside, and Nordren slammed into the ground a shield's width from where they had been standing. The beast smashed Tom from his feet with one of her wings, sending him flying to the edge of the cave. Tom dizzily hauled himself up. To his horror, he saw Nordren rearing to her full height above his aunt and uncle. Her black beak looked as sharp as an axe. "No!" he shouted. Suddenly, in a flash of red, Epos descended onto Nordren's back. High-pitched "Ah! Ah!" screeches pierced the cavern, and black and red feathers fluttered in the air. "Uncle Henry!" Tom yelled. "You have to get out of here!" Nordren threw Epos off her back, and the flame bird landed in a heavy heap by the cave wall. Then the Black Phoenix turned to attack Tom's uncle again. Tom swung his sword at the evil beast. The blade thung rebounded off Nordren's beak with the sound of a blacksmith's hammer and sent Nordren reeling backwards. Tom's uncle and aunt darted towards the broken doorway. "They're getting away!" shouted Sethrina. Nordren turned her massive head and bounded across the cavern after them. Tom threw a desperate glance at Epos. She was moving, but only a little. There was nothing Tom could do. Suddenly, an arrow buried itself into Nordren's chest feathers. Helena! The beast staggered. Tom's friend unleashed another shaft, which thudded next to the first. "Get back, slave of Malvel!" she cried. Nordren's howl of pain filled the dank air. Uncle Henry and Aunt Maria slipped through the doorway. The evil beast bent her head to her chest and snapped the arrows away, flinging them to the cavern floor. Her eyes glowed silver with anger. Helena fired another arrow, but Nordren batted it away with her wing. Then she charged at Helena. Tom dashed to help. He swung his sword and felt it slice into Nordren's wing. The beast screeched again and rose off the ground. She hovered, flapping one wing frantically. The injured one half folded into her side. Spiros was suddenly beside her, darting at the wound. "What's she doing?" asked Helena. "She can't help. She's just a ghost." Spiros wheeled away, then dived again, letting out a desperate wail. Epos sent a cry from the cavern floor. "She's trying to attack the wound," said Tom. "Finish the boy!" shouted Sethrina. "Malvel wants him dead!" Nordren twisted away from Spiros and swooped down, her talons whistling through the air. Tom lifted his shield and felt the weight of the bird crash into the wood. He was knocked to the ground as the Black Phoenix retreated for another attack. "Your shield!" cried Helena. Tom clambered up and looked at his shield. It was gouged where the talon had torn into the wood. This beast was more powerful than any he had faced before. "Your magic is no match for Malvel's!" laughed Sethrina. Tom gripped his shield tighter and called upon the power of his golden chainmail. His chest swelled with courage. He knew he couldn't defeat Nordren here on the cave floor. He needed a plan. "I have to get into the air," he thought. The evil phoenix dived again. Tom ducked again beneath her stabbing beak, then rolled between her talons, his nostrils filled with the stink of rotting feathers. There in front of him was Epos. Tom sprinted towards the flame bird and leapt onto her back. She immediately extended her flaming wings and flew up. Nordren soared after them as Tom was carried to the upper reaches of the cavern. He clutched Epos's feathers tightly as the flame bird twisted to avoid Nordren's talons. "I must get above her," he thought. Epos seemed to understand and flapped her wings harder to rise above the evil beast. Tom saw his chance and leapt off Epos's back. For a moment he was weightless. Then he crashed onto Nordren's wings, his fingers struggling to grip the slimy feathers. He stabbed with his sword and pierced the wing again. Nordren convulsed, and Tom was thrown into the air. The cave floor rushed towards him, but the magic eagle's feather in his shield slowed his fall. He hit the ground, jolting his knees. Nordren squawked, and drops of her black blood splashed onto the cavern floor. Sethrina's laugh pierced the cave. "If you kill her," she said, "Spiros will never have her body back." As Nordren hovered, Spiros bravely flew at her again, darting towards the injured wing. Nordren twisted in the air, not letting the ghost draw nearer. Finally, Tom understood. "Elena!" Tom shouted. "Spiros is trying to reclaim her body. She needs to get in through the wounds." "No!" said Sethrina. "You're wrong!" But Tom could hear panic in her voice. "Ignore her!" he said. "We have to keep attacking. It's the only way." Chapter 6. The Return of Spiros. Elena unleashed an arrow towards Nordren. It fell short. The beast was too high. Sethrina burst out laughing. "You've only got 3 arrows left," she cried. "Elena, use Epos," said Tom. His friend dashed towards the flame bird. A frown creased Sethrina's pale forehead. She dived towards Elena, swinging her sword. Tom hurled his shield, and it spun through the air to catch Sethrina. She sprawled on the ground, out cold. Now it was only the evil beast they faced. Elena climbed onto Epos's back. "You need to distract Nordren," said Tom. "But how will you get up there?" asked Elena. "Leave that to me," he replied. "Wait for my signal." Epos sprang into the air. Lighting the gloom with her wings, Nordren swooped down to attack, and Tom's heart almost stopped. It looked as though Epos could be torn to pieces by the Black Phoenix's talons. But at the very last moment, the flame bird dodged to one side and rose above Nordren. The evil beast looped up to attack a second time. "Now!" shouted Tom. Elena bravely let go of Epos's feathers and placed the first of her last 3 arrows to the bowstring. One after the other, she fired all 3 at the approaching phoenix. P'choom, p'choom, p'choom. They whistled through the air and thudded into the beast's feathers. Nordren let out a "Ah!" screech. Tom took a deep breath. This is my only chance, he thought. Using his magical speed, he ran at the cavern wall, then leapt into the air. He took 1, 2, 3, 4 massive strides, climbing the rock, then pushed himself off. At the same moment, he twisted in the air and threw out his arms. He had no shield to stop him falling now. His hands closed around the frayed edge of the rope, dangling in the centre of the cavern. With his heart pounding, he scrambled up the rope, hand over hand, until his arms burned. Nordren was still keening in pain. "Ah! Ah!" as Tom climbed below her. He tugged his sword from its sheath and lunged at the Black Phoenix. The blade cut a long gash at the base of her wing. Her cries "Ah!" pierced the air as hot ash and black blood sprayed across the cave. Tom couldn't hold on any longer and let go of the rope, tumbling downwards. But instead of landing on hard rock, he bounced into something soft and warm. He opened his eyes to see Epos's feathers. Elena sat astride her neck. The good beast must have swooped down to save him. "Thanks," said Tom breathlessly. He and Elena jumped off as Epos landed. Above, Nordren was frantically flapping her one good wing in a desperate attempt to stay aloft. The other hung limply, only half attached to her body. Despite the battle, Tom almost felt sorry for the beast. "Look!" whispered Elena. "Spiros!" The ghost phoenix swept through the cave towards the injured beast. The green light from her eyes faded, and the diamond's talons dimmed to grey. As she approached Nordren, her body seemed to become more transparent, like a wisp of cloud stretched in the wind. Then she wrapped itself around Nordren's body and was suddenly gone. The ash stopped falling. As Spiros poured herself into the wound in the evil phoenix's wing, Nordren's cries became weaker, and she sank through the air. Tom watched as she came to rest on the cavern floor. Her black, slimy body was completely still. "Oh no," said Elena. "What have we done?" Tom rushed forward. He sank to his knees beside the huge body of the dead bird. But a soft cawing made him look up. The black feathers on the motionless head were glowing, first brown, then red. The colour spread across the feathers on the phoenix's back and then along its wings. Soon they were as bright as rubies, and Tom had to shield his eyes and step back. Elena stood beside him, mouth open. The beast lifted its head and leapt onto its jewelled talons. Finally, its eyes opened, shedding emerald light across the cavern. Nordren had been transformed. With a whoosh, the phoenix shot out her wings. Her injuries had been magically healed. She lifted herself into the air, scattering dappled light into the darkness. "It's Spiros," said Elena, with tears of joy in her eyes. Epos cawed with delight and spiraled upwards into the cavern, adding her own light to that of her fellow phoenix. Tom caught sight of his aunt and uncle at the doorway of the chamber, gazing up. "It's safe," he called to them. They walked hesitantly into the room, hand in hand, transfixed by the incredible new beast. The magnificent phoenix swept over to Tom and Elena and lowered her head. Tom stroked her beautiful golden beak, and she cawed softly. "Nordren," said a weak voice. Tom spun round to see Sethrina sitting up and rubbing her head. "Nordren's gone," he said coldly. "And Spiros has her body back," added Elena. Horror contorted Sethrina's features. "It can't be," she said. "Malvel's magic is too powerful." She reached for her sword, but Tom was too quick. He knocked it from her hand and stood with the point of his blade at her neck. "Good magic always overpowers evil," he said. "This time, perhaps," spat Sethrina. "But I'm not afraid to die." Tom looked into her dark eyes. Her hatred shone out. "I don't want to kill people," he said. "That's what makes us different." Sethrina's mouth twisted in anger. "That's what makes you weak," she said. "How can we get out?" said Elena, ignoring the other girl's taunts and turning to Tom. "I don't fancy swimming through the icy water." "She must know," said Tom's aunt, pointing to Sethrina. "She brought us here." Sethrina lifted her chin in defiance. "Why should I tell you?" she sneered. "You'll have me locked in King Hugo's dungeon by nightfall." Tom looked at Elena, raising his eyebrows. They needed Sethrina, and she knew it. Elena nodded. "Tell us how to get out of this place, and you can go free." "Just like that," said Sethrina, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Yes," said Tom, "but you must promise never to return to Avantia again." Sethrina frowned, then sank back, defeated. Very well, she said. Elena gathered her arrows from the cavern floor and put one of them back in her bow, aiming its sharp point at Sethrina. Show us the way out, she said. Chapter 7. Farewell to the Phoenix. Sethrina climbed to her feet and walked to the far side of the cavern. Tom, Elena, Uncle Henry and Aunt Maria followed. Spiros and Epos hopped behind. It looked as though they were all heading towards a solid wall, but Sethrina stopped in front of it. Where now? Asked Tom. Sethrina placed her hand on the slick rock and pushed. Is no one going to help me then? She asked. Tom came forwards and leaned his shoulder into the wall. It wasn't rock, he realised, just wood, disguised to look like rock. He pushed again. A low grating sound echoed in the vast space before a crack as tall as 4 men appeared in the cavern wall, casting a shaft of light into the dim cave. A secret door. With the help of his magical strength, it swung open. A blast of stale air filled his nostrils. Beyond was a tunnel roughly hewn into the bare rock. The passage was tall and narrow, but Spiros tucked her wings into her side and squeezed through. They reached the bottom of a spiral staircase cut into the rock. Tom looked up. Above, through the heart of the coiling steps, he could see a pale circle of greenish light. We're almost there, he said. Perhaps it's a trap, said Elena. Tom's aunt and uncle shared a look of uncertainty. I'll go first, said Tom. Epos and Spiros can fly up the middle. They'll alert us to any dangers. As soon as they were all on the steps, the 2 birds took to the air and soared past them. Moments later, their caws of joy drifted down to them. Ah! Ah! It's safe, Tom said. Suddenly, he felt a shove on his back and tripped in onto the stairs. Sethrina darted up past him. When she stood on the final curve of the staircase, she looked back with a grin. Farewell, fools, she shouted. We will meet again. Elena set off after her, but Tom held her back. Leave her, he said. We promised her freedom anyway. Sethrina raced up the last few steps and was gone. At the summit of the staircase, a green glow filled the tunnel, and soon Tom could see why. Chinks of daylight shone through a curtain of leaves. Tom pushed them aside and stepped out amongst the trees. He found himself standing on a ledge beneath an outcrop of rock. A river flowed like a silver ribbon through the lush green valley below. Far off, the blue sea twinkled in the sunlight. He could see Sethrina, a distant speck, running towards the valley. We must be in the northern mountains, said Tom. We're safe again. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Uncle Henry looking down at him with pride in his eyes. What you did was very brave, he said. Tom's aunt nodded in agreement. Without you, we would have died, she added. It's time for you to go home to Erinel, Tom said. How? Asked Aunt Maria. It must be several days' walk from here. We're not as young as we used to be, you know. Tom laughed. Epos will give you a ride. The great beast squawked as though she understood. Uncle Henry climbed onto Epos's back, then helped Aunt Maria to scramble up. What about you? Aren't you coming with us? He asked. Tom looked at Elena and Spiros. No. While Malvel is still free to wreak havoc, my job isn't done. We'll have to go back to Storm and Silver. There'll be more beast quests to come. Tom's uncle nodded in understanding. Be careful, both of you, and good luck. Epos took a few steps to the end of the ledge. She opened her massive wings and leapt off, soaring over the valleys below. Tom watched the majestic beast disappear into the distance. Uncle Henry and Aunt Maria would be back in Erenal by nightfall. Tom turned to Spiros. Time for you to go home too, he said, patting the phoenix's wing. Spiros dipped her golden beak in a bow of thanks, then ruffled her ruby feathers. She unfolded her wings, which gleamed in the sun, and cast a shadow over Tom's head. He held his breath. Then the phoenix sprang into the air, giving a huge squawk that carried across the empty sky. Oh, Tom, she's amazing, gasped Elena. And now she's back where she belongs, said Tom, guarding the skies of Avantia. We've rescued my aunt and uncle, but we've helped Spiros too. This has turned out to be a bigger quest than I'd ever imagined. Spiros swooped past them a final time, then glided towards the horizon. Tom, look! Cried Elena, twisting around. Tom turned and gasped in surprise. There, silhouetted on the slope above them, were 4 huge shapes. Furno the fire dragon, his mouth glowing with flame. Arctur, the mountain giant, grinning broadly and revealing his brown teeth. Tagus the horseman, stamping the ground with his enormous hooves, and Nanook the snow monster, hammering her white-furred chest with her palms. Tom glanced back towards the sea and saw a flash of rainbow colours as Sepron, the sea serpent, broke the waves. He felt his shield vibrate on his arm. Their friends had gathered to congratulate them on completion of their latest quest. These are the best friends I could ever have, Tom said, laughing and waving at the beasts. After you, Elena. You'll never be alone on your quests, she said. Tom stared out across Avantia, his home. It was safe again. For now. Let's go and find Storm and Silver, he said, setting off down the slope. There would be more difficult quests to come, but whatever lay ahead of him, Tom knew he would do his best. For his friends and for Avantia. There we are. That's the end of the Beast Quest with Spiros, the Ghost Phoenix. I hope you enjoyed that story. I certainly did. And I hope you will come back another time for another Beast Quest when we have one. Probably not for a while yet. As I said, tomorrow is Star Wars Day. So come on back tomorrow when we have another tale from the Empire. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy. Thank you so much for being with me, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.